Today, Harley Davidson announced the full specs of their long-awaited adventure bike, the Pan America. Now, this is a huge moment for Harley as they've taken a punt on a market sector that's far out of their comfort zone of big, torquey cruisers and tourers. So have they managed to deliver something that can truly compete with the likes of the BMW GS, KTM 1290 and Ducati Multistrada that have all set the standard in the adventure sector for many years? On first impressions, it really looks like they have, and in today's video, I'll tell you why. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news right here on YouTube, then please do remember to hit subscribe. Now, Harley announced two models today, the 1250 Pan America and the 1250 Pan America Special, but the majority of the bike is common to both versions, starting with the engine. The Revolution Max is new from the ground up, and it's a huge departure from the usual long-stroke V-twins that they make, which primarily focus on producing bags of torque low down in the revs. The 1250cc liquid-cooled 60-degree V-twin used here is over-square, which is to say that the bore is wider than the stroke is long, and that means that it can rev up higher to produce some proper peak power. The headline figures are 150 brake horsepower at 8,750 RPM and 94 pounds-feet of peak torque at 6,750, which are both pretty competitive in the adventure market, especially the power. Harley claimed that the slim nature of a V-twin makes it perfect for adventure riding as it keeps the mass centralized, which helps with balance, whilst also allowing the rider plenty of space for their feet and legs. They've also sought to keep it lightweight with single-piece aluminium cylinders and magnesium engine covers, whilst it also serves as a stressed member in the chassis to provide strength and rigidity. But perhaps one of the most impressive features is the computer-controlled variable valve timing on both the intake and exhaust camshafts, which can alter the timing through 40 degrees of rotation. Harley say that the timing phaser is located between the cam drive sprocket and the camshaft and uses a solenoid plunger to control ported hydraulics that change the cam timing. The effect is that they can generate more torque in the low revs, whilst also freeing the engine up to produce peak power as it climbs through the revs. It can also help with fuel efficiency and therefore range. Speaking of which, there's a 21.2-litre tank, which with a claimed fuel economy of 46 miles per gallon should theoretically give you just over 250 miles on a tank. A neat feature is that the filler is located at the front of the tank, which ought to make fueling up quicker if you're carrying a tank bag, as there's no need to remove it. Now, there's only so much you can tell from the spec sheet, and how this engine performs in the real world remains to be seen, but on first impressions it looks pretty strong. I've already mentioned that the engine provides much of the structure for the Pan America, and then three distinct elements are bolted to it with a front frame, mid frame and subframe, meaning that each can be removed and replaced if damaged from a drop, which is potentially more likely off-road. There's a cast aluminium swing arm in order to keep unsprung weight down, and in fact, total weight seems pretty reasonable for this size and type of bike. The standard Pan America weighs in at 228 kilograms in running order, whilst the Special tips the scales at 254 because it gets a lot of extra equipment. Both models roll on a 19-inch front wheel and a 17-inch rear, with cast aluminium versions as standard and spokes as an option on the Special. Harley collaborated with Michelin to develop their Scorcher adventure tyres especially for this bike with adventure touring in mind, whilst Anarchy Wild tyres can be spec'd through a dealer for more serious off-road work. For suspension, the standard bike gets 190mm of travel front and rear from a fully adjustable 47mm Showa upside-down fork and a Showa piggyback reservoir shock, but this is one of the areas in which the Special really excels. It gets an electronically adjustable semi-active system with the components provided by Showa and the software developed by Harley. Damping is automatically tweaked to suit the riding style and conditions, whilst preload is also automatic, achieving the optimal amount of sag whether you're riding solo, with a passenger, with luggage or both. Now, there's also a pretty incredible optional extra, especially for those who want to ride a big adventure bike but find the height and weight intimidating, and that's adaptive ride height. Essentially, it lowers the bike when you come to a standstill to make it easier to get your feet down, and then pops back up on the move to maintain a ground clearance of 210mm. Depending on your preload setting, it can drop the bike by up to 2 inches with a lowest unladen seat height of about 830mm. Now that might still sound pretty tall to some riders, but the lowest seat setting for the standard bike is almost 870mm, so the semi-active suspension with the adaptive ride height spec can really make a difference. Braking is taken care of by a pair of 4-piston radially mounted monoblock Brembo calipers that were developed with Harley specifically for this bike, and they bite on 320mm discs, whilst there's a single pop brake on a 280mm disc at the rear. Typically you'd find own brand Harley equipment across their range, but these Brembos look to be up to scratch with any other premium adventure bike. ABS comes as standard, of course, and is lean sensitive owing to an inertial measurement unit which feeds lean angle amongst other things back to the bike. The Pan America also makes use of linked braking, which applies the rear on your behalf when operating the front brake. Traction control is also cornering enhanced, and these aids can be adjusted along with throttle response and engine braking level by choosing from 5 riding modes of road, sport, rain, off-road and off-road plus. There's a lean sensitive drag torque system which controls rear wheel slip under heavy deceleration, and there's also a hill hold control feature which holds the brakes while stationary on an incline before disengaging as the throttle and clutch are applied. This feature, of course, can be especially useful when touring and loaded up with both luggage and a passenger. There's also cruise control as standard, and all of the riding modes and rider aids can be administered through a new 6.8-inch tilting touchscreen TFT display, which has a non-reflective glass cover for better visibility in bright conditions. The touchscreen is disabled when the bike is in motion, when you'll have to use the buttons on the switchgear instead. There's a Bluetooth integration, which means that calls and music from your phone can be controlled, and with the free Harley Davidson app you can also get navigation prompts. So again, advanced electronics aren't typically what you'd associate with Harley Davidson, but the Pan America has pretty much every feature going, and that adaptive ride height is, as far as I'm aware, unique to Harley. So from running through all the specs there, the Pan America seems properly well equipped to me, and to be honest, I was expecting the price to be a little higher than it is. The base bike starts at 14 grand in the UK, whilst the special starts at 15.5. For the extra £1,500, you get the semi-active suspension with automatic preload, a tyre pressure monitoring system, a centre stand, a brake pedal that can be adjusted without tools to accommodate riding seated or standing, an aluminium skid plate, Harley's Daymaker adaptive headlight tech, handguards, heated grips, and a steering damper. That seems like pretty good value to me when you consider what those upgrades would typically cost to spec individually. The fancier paint jobs, adaptive ride height, and spoke wheels are extra, but even with all of them spec'd, it's still under 17 grand. I'm going to make a direct head-to-head comparison with BMW's R1250 GS later in the week, as that's the benchmark in this category and consistently the best-selling motorcycle in the UK, but I have to say, on the face of it, the Pan Am looks competitively priced. So perhaps Harley have played a blinder here, although of course it needs some proper testing and real-world riding to see how the package all comes together. I also think that the looks might be a hurdle for some customers, because although I quite like what they've done with it, it's certainly a divisive design, and I've seen plenty of comments here on YouTube that come down on either side. But as always, I'd love to know what you make of it in the comments below this video. Have Harley managed to surpass your expectations with the Pan America, and what do you make of the looks now that we've got the final production model ready to go? I reckon it really needs speccing with the spoke wheels for that proper aggressive off-road look, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.